Hey, and welcome back to another edition of Standard Spike. This week I'm actually playing Standard for the last time this season, most likely, because I don't really like the Standard format. I think it's a little dull, and there's more interesting things going on. But since Ravnica is heading our way pretty soon, I figured I'd do it one last time. So I'm playing Rugpod, which is my deck of choice right now. I just don't know what else to play, really. I'm not a big fan of Delver, even though it is consistently the best deck. So this is what I'm playing here. If you've seen it before, it is quite similar, but I can go ahead and go over some of the distinct things about the deck. Um, as a prominent Birthing Pod deck, we have 8 1-drops. There's no question about that being correct. We have 4 Strangler Geist, which is kind of a bad thing about the deck, is that it relies on the card. In this format, this card is actually not that strong because of Blade Splicer. There's some Pillar of Flames floating around. That's not really the big deal. Blade Splicer is the big one, and the fact that it just gets outclassed. But since it is 2 bodies with the Birthing Pod, it's still quite good in this deck. Also, the Hollow Rider sideboard plan, which is something I'm probably going to talk about a little more, goes really well with the Geists. We have Elvish Visionary from M13, which is another 2-drop for us to Zenith for or Pod for. I initially was just playing 1. But I just cut the Corruptor from the main, decided to play 2 Visionaries instead, because the decks this was good against stopped seeing play, or I at least stopped playing against them. And this card is just too narrow, I think, to be main decked in the current format. Plus, this deck, except for against other Birthing Pods, this deck doesn't really care about other artifacts for the most part, so it's really just for Birthing Pod. Then we have Phantasmal Image, which is pretty obvious card to have in this deck. Just makes everything better. Deceiver Exarch to go from 2 to 4, pretty obvious as well. And that's kind of the entire reason we have blue is for those 2. 2 Borderline Rangers. It used to just be 1, but I kind of need to have a third 3-drop, and it does a lot of good stuff for this deck, obviously. If I could play Sylvan Ranger, I would for sure. And guess what? It's back in Ravnica, but not soon enough. So then we have 4 Birthing Pods, obviously. 1 Metamorph for the target. 4 Hunt Masters, just our best possible 4-drop. We can technically playing it like, I don't know, 12 of those, I guess, for 4 Zeniths and 4 Pods. It is kind of outclassed by some things, because in this format there's a lot of creatures. Blade Splicer and Restoration Angel happen to outclass this guy, but it's great against Delver. Just absolutely great against Delver. We have our 5-drop section, 1 Thragtusk, which is just, it's a great card, but we really don't want more than 1 in this deck. Silverhearts is our better 5-drop against other green decks, typically, because it survives Bonfire, just creates a massive threat, or 2 threats, rather. Conscripts gets the Infernal Titan, wins the game, typically, in different fashions. And then, obviously, Infernal Titan. 1 Bonfire the Damned, because sometimes you just have to get lucky, and that's what it's there for. Then the 4 Green Sun Zenith to make everything more consistent. So the worst thing about this deck is sometimes you don't drop Birthing Pod, and then it's kind of just a weak aggro deck, where the aggro cards get outclassed pretty easily, like that one. So that is definitely the worst thing about the deck. For the sideboard, I suppose when you don't draw a pod, you try to get the best advantage you can, and that's why a card like this is in the deck. Like if you just have a couple threats or 1 threat, you can go long, and this card just gets really strong, enables you to win games. But at the same time, a lot of matchups just happen to be races, and this card is not fast enough in this deck to actually matter. But sometimes it does push you over the top, though. And the sideboard, card by card, why not? Ancient Grudge is an obligatory artifact removal spell. I did say we don't care a lot about artifacts, except for opposing Birthing Pods. So to be honest, this card is not really necessary, but there's poison floating around, and this is our best answer to Inkmoth, because it's not narrow. It's a Claw Mirror as well. And sometimes there's swords that we might bring it in for, probably not. But it definitely does accompany this for when we want to answer Birthing Pods. 2 Arc Trail, mostly for Delver. We have a lot of different removal spells, and they each have their own purpose. This one is for Delver, but it's certainly good against other green decks as well. If you can get 2 1-drops or a Huntmaster and a 1-drop, that's usually pretty strong. Bonfire is the kind of just end-all removal spell. Pillar of Flame is just for zombies primarily. Infect, sure, definitely bringing it against Infect too. But you just want to have something specifically for zombies, because there's, for one thing, so much floating around. And the matchup is not actually that strong, in my opinion. So that is the one matchup, actually, where I would want to have something like really specific for it. Hellrider. Oh, yeah, so Hellrider. In the main deck, Hellrider doesn't really fit because a lot of decks are playing Blade Splicer and Restoration Angel. And sometimes the plan just doesn't come together if it's if you're not like really prepared to do it like you are in the post board games. But you actually bring it in pretty often, or at least I do. I've been bringing it against zombies, red green aggro, not in Delver, but I'm not even sure that's wrong to bring it in against Delver. It's really hard to say. The matchup can go a couple different ways, and sometimes this would be great, and sometimes it's not. And typically Huntmaster is what you want against Delver, so that's why I don't bring it in against them. But the point is that a lot of matchups are races. The card presents a ton of power, and the fact that we have clones makes it really good, and haste creatures. There's so many series of plays you can do with this card if you get to untap with it, especially. Let's see, if you untap with it and a pod, you can like Zenith for Geist or just have a Geist, sacrifice that, chain up to Metamorph, copy Hellrider, and that would be, I think that's 18 damage. 4, 6, no, I miscounted. 15 damage. If you have a bird, that's 17. It's just so much damage if they let you keep it. Stinger Fling, Delver, Thragtusk, Delver, and zombies basically. Pod, green matchups basically, and ramp, and mostly just for ramp, I think. If there's any control decks, it's really good against planeswalkers too. Those decks really don't exist, or they're just not very good right now. And there used to be a Malira in the sideboard, but it turns out Poison is actually not a horrible matchup. Between all these removal spells, Corruptor, Silverheart is actually a great game plan against them, it turns out. And then, you know what? I don't think I board in Hellrider, or do I? It is definitely a racy matchup, so I think I do bring it in. And Huntmaster is not at its best at all, so I think I make that swap. Silverheart is actually good against them because, except for one creature, all their guys are ground creatures. So if you just soak up a ton of damage with this card, a lot of the times they just sputter out and then you can kill them. But it is a race, and they're not going to interact with you, whereas you have, after board, you have a ton of ways to interact with them. So usually you're going to win. Turns out it's a pretty good matchup. But I had a Malira anyway, just because, like, why not? But I actually wanted to cut it because I needed more room to beat zombies. So that's the whole deck, and let's go ahead and get started.